Emily Parker woke up that Thursday morning thinking it would be an ordinary day. She made herself a simple breakfast, opened the curtains to let in the soft Portland light, and tried to ignore the steady dripping sound coming from the kitchen. The sink had been leaking for 2 days, and she had done everything she could, tightening the handle, placing towels underneath, even watching a tutorial that only confused her more. Nothing worked. The small apartment felt quieter than usual, almost too quiet. And for some reason, the dripping sound felt louder than any noise she had heard all week. She finally gave up and called a local repair service. She didn't expect much, just quick help, maybe a simple fix. She had no idea that the man on the other end of the line, the calm voice that said, "I'll be there in an hour," would change the entire rhythm of her day. When she hung up, she felt a strange nervous energy ripple through her, as if something important was on its way, even though she couldn't name it. When the knock finally came, it wasn't a loud or rushed knock. It was steady, confident, almost gentle. Emily paused for a moment before opening the door, smoothing her hair. Suddenly aware of her plain gray t-shirt and messy bun, she opened it anyway, and that's when she first saw him. Michael Turner stood at her doorway holding a toolbox in one hand. He had warm hazel eyes, slightly tired but steady, and his posture carried the kind of calm strength that immediately made her feel less stressed about the leaking sink. He wore a simple work shirt with his name stitched on the pocket, sleeves slightly rolled up, revealing a careful, hard-working presence. He wasn't flashy or loud. He felt grounded, real. "Hi, Emily. I'm here for the sink," he said, offering her a small but genuine smile. His voice sounded exactly like it had on the phone, lo.com, and reassuring. She stepped aside to let him in, suddenly aware of the quiet of her home and the small trail of water on the kitchen tiles. "It's over there," she said, pointing toward the counter while trying to sound casual. "It started leaking out of nowhere." "No worries," he said. "I'll take a look." He knelt down by the cabinet and opened it, shining a small flashlight inside. Emily stood a little distance away, pretending to scroll through her phone, but her eyes drifted toward him again and again. She noticed how focused he looked, how gently he handled the pipes, how he worked with this mix of patience and skill. He didn't rush, didn't sigh in frustration. He treated the repair like it mattered. Something about that touched her more deeply than she expected for the last few months. Life had felt heavy. She worked long hours at the library, spent most of her evenings alone, and had gone through a quiet breakup that left her heart dull and tired. She had gotten used to doing everything by herself, used to silence filling her apartment. But now with Michael here, the silence felt different, softer, almost comforting. He asked her small questions while he worked, how long she had lived there, what she did for a living if the leak started suddenly. She answered, trying not to overthink every word. But she felt strangely aware of his presence, as if the air in the room had shifted. After a few minutes, he pulled out a piece of the pipe and frowned at it thoughtfully. "This one is cracked," he said. "Might be from where? I'll need to replace it." Emily nodded, though she didn't really know much about plumbing. "Is it serious?" He looked up at her with that same steady calm. "Nothing I can't fix. Just might take a little longer." Something in the way he said that "come, sure," almost reassuring, made her chest warm. It wasn't what he said, but how he said it. Like he wanted her to know she didn't need to worry about anything as he worked. She made tea for both of them, needing something to do so she wouldn't appear too nervous or awkward. When she handed him a mug, their fingers brushed lightly. It wasn't intentional, just a small accidental touch, but it sent a sudden flutter through her chest. She pulled her hand back quickly, hoping he didn't notice the way she quietly inhaled. But he did notice. He didn't say anything, just offered a polite thanks. Yet his eyes held something softer for a moment, something almost unspoken. Michael worked quietly for a while, tightening bolts, replacing parts, checking every connection with care. The soft sound of tools and running water filled the space, and Emily found herself watching him again. Not in a way that felt romantic yet, not fully, but in a way that made her feel safe, connected, curious. After nearly 30 minutes, he exhaled slowly and sat back on his heels. "All right," he murmured. "I think I found the real problem." His tone had changed, slightly not panicked, but thoughtful, like he had discovered something that needed more attention. Emily stepped closer. "Is something wrong?" He turned the flashlight toward a deeper section of the piping, pointing at a small hidden joint that had completely corroded. "This part is rusted through," he said. "It's going to take a bit more work than I planned." The way he spoke wasn't dramatic, but something in his voice carried weight. Not fear, responsibility. As if he didn't want to disappoint her. As if fixing this mattered to him more than just doing his job. She nodded quietly, not fully understanding plumbing, but understanding the heaviness in his tone. "Do what you need to do," she said softly. He gave her a small smile, one that seemed grateful for her patience. And that moment, simple as it was, felt strangely meaningful. Emily didn't know why she felt so drawn to him. Maybe it was the way he carried himself, or how gently he spoke, or how he seemed to carry something on his shoulders that he didn't talk about. Whatever it was, she felt it deeply, as if the universe had brought someone unexpected into her small kitchen for a reason. She couldn't see yet as he reached deeper under the sink. His sleeve brushed against her hand, and she froze for a moment. The contact was brief, barely noticeable, but her heart reacted instantly. He glanced up at her again as a calm, thoughtful, searching just a little too long, and then he said the words that shifted everything. "Emily, this might be more complicated than I thought." The way he said it made her chest tighten, not because of the sink, but because she sensed there was something else behind that tone. Something personal. Something he hadn't said yet. And in that quiet kitchen, with tools scattered on the floor and a leaking pipe still dripping in the background, Emily felt the first hint of a story. Neither of them expected a story that had already begun the moment she opened the door. Michael stayed longer than he expected. What should have been a quick repair slowly turned into something more complicated. And every time he fixed one problem, another appeared. Emily could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he kept exhaling heavily, as if life itself had been weighing on him long before he stepped into her apartment. The kitchen floor was covered with tools, wrenches, clamps, a small flashlight rolling from side to side. He worked with focus, but she noticed how tired he looked. Not physically exhausted, but emotionally drained. Like someone who had been carrying a quiet storm with no one to share it with. Emily leaned against the counter, watching him silently. She didn't want to interrupt, yet something inside her kept urging her to speak. He looked like he needed someone to ask the simple question no one had been asking. "Are you okay?" But she waited, unsure if she had the right to step into his world when she barely knew him. After a while, he pulled the rusty joint from under the sink and sat back with a sigh. "Sorry," he said, rubbing his forehead. "This is taking forever." She offered a soft smile. "It's fine. You're doing your best." He looked at her for a moment longer than casual strangers. Shouldn't something in his eyes softened? Like her calm voice had reached a place inside him that had been closed for too long. "Do you want something to drink?" she asked quickly, wanting to ease the heaviness she sensed in him. "Tea would be great," he replied, sounding grateful. Emily prepared 2 mugs and handed one to him. Their fingers brushed again, and even though the touch was small, it carried a strange warmth neither of them commented on. He took a sip, leaned back against the cabinet, and let out another slow breath. "Everything okay?" she finally asked. He hesitated. It was a small pause, barely a few seconds, but filled with meaning. It was the pause of someone deciding whether to open up or shut down again. Then he said quietly, "It's been a tough week." Emily didn't push, but her eyes told him she was listening. Really listening. And maybe that was why he continued. Even though he didn't have to. "My dad's in the hospital," he said, keeping his voice steady but low. "Heart problems. He went in last week. I'm trying to juggle work, family, bills. It's a lot." Emily felt something tighten inside. Her not pity, but empathy. She knew what it felt like to carry pain quietly. She had lost her mother years ago, and she remembered the helplessness, the worry. The nights where sleep didn't come. I'm sorry, Michael, she said gently. That must be a lot to deal with. He let out a shaky breath, almost as if her words released something inside him. Yeah, I didn't mean to bring it up. I usually don't talk about it with clients. It just slipped out. It's okay, she said softly. Sometimes you need to say things out loud. He looked at her again, this time with something heavier in his expression. You're easy to talk to. I don't know why. Emily felt a small warmth bloom in her chest. Not romantic, yet just human connection. It's kind that arrives quietly and unexpectedly. They sat there on the kitchen floor for a moment. Him with a cup of tea in his hands. Her with a soft expression on her face, two strangers sharing a moment that felt deeper than anything either of them planned. But the moment didn't last long. His phone buzzed. Loudly against the tile floor, vibrating with urgency. Michael picked it up, and the second he looked at the screen, the calmness in his face changed. His whole expression shifted into worry. It's the hospital, he said quickly. Emily's heart dropped, even though she didn't know his father. She felt the panic through him, the way his hand shook slightly as he tried to answer the call. She stayed quiet while he stepped a few feet away, speaking in a low voice. She could hear little pieces. Yes, I'm on my way. Is he stable? Okay, yes. I'll be there soon. When he hung up, he grabbed his tools immediately, barely able to hide his panic. I'm so sorry, Emily, he said, voice rushed. I have to go. I can come back later today, tomorrow, whenever you want. I just need to get there. It's okay, she said quickly. Go. Don't worry about the sink. He nodded, but he still looked apologetic. Like he didn't want to leave something unfinished, not the job, not the moment. Not the strange connection between them. He gathered his tools fast, his hands moving with urgency. But before he left, he paused at the doorway. Just for a second. Just long enough to look at her with a gentleness that held something unspoken. Thank you, he said, voice soft despite the rush. You don't know how much it helped. Just talking. Emily felt something deep stir in her chest, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Take care of your dad, she said. He nodded and left, closing the door behind him. His footsteps faded down the hallway. And the apartment fell into silence again. But it wasn't the same silence as before. It felt emptier now. It's like something important had walked out with him. She stood there staring at the door for a long moment, trying to understand why her heart felt heavier than it should. Why she felt like she had lost something she had only just found. Emily walked back into the kitchen. The sink was still partly disassembled, tools scattered everywhere. A quiet reminder that he had been here, not just physically, but emotionally too. She touched the counter where he had rested his hand earlier and closed her eyes for a moment. Why did she feel this way? Why did she care so much about a man she had only met an hour ago? She tried to tell herself it was just empathy, just concern. But deep down, she knew it was more than that. Something about him had reached her in a way she couldn't explain. And while she didn't know if he would come back, or when, she already feared the answer more than she should as she picked up one of the tools. He had forgotten a small screwdriver she found near the cabinet. She held it in her hand and whispered quietly to herself, "Please let him be okay." Because even though she barely knew him, she had felt something real, something unexpected, something that made her heart beat differently for the first time in months. And she wasn't sure what scared her more, the idea that he might not return, or the possibility that she wanted him to. The rain was falling hard the night Michael rushed out of Emily's apartment. She watched his truck disappear down the road, headlights cutting through the storm, and something inside her twisted in a way she didn't understand. She barely knew him. Yet his sudden departure felt like someone had pulled a thread from the center of her chest. The apartment felt different after he left, quieter, heavier, almost lonely. The half-fixed sink sat there with tools scattered around it, like a small reminder that their unexpected moment had been interrupted before it could become something more. Emily walked around the apartment for the next hour, trying to distract herself. She made tea, sat on the couch, tried reading a book. But every time she tried to focus, her mind drifted back to him. His tired but warm smile. The way he listened. The way he spoke to her like she wasn't just a customer. The way he'd said, "You're easy to talk to." With a softness that had reached straight into her heart, she told herself it was normal to worry. Anyone would feel concerned after hearing someone's parent was in the hospital. But she knew this wasn't only worry. It was something more personal, something unexpected and confusing. That night, she barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she imagined him driving through the rain. Walking into a bright hospital hallway, hearing things no child ever wants to hear. She imagined his exhaustion, his fear, the weight on his shoulders. And she wished more than she should have that she could be there to support him somehow. The next morning, she woke up early, checked her phone, even though he didn't have her number, and stared at the door far more than she wanted to admit. She kept telling herself he will come back for the sink, but a tiny part of her whispered, what if he doesn't? 2 days passed. 2 long, slow, restless days. She went to work at the library but couldn't focus. She returned home to the same quiet apartment, the same half-finished repair. The sink still dripped occasionally, and every time she heard it, she thought of him kneeling on the kitchen floor, sleeves rolled up, trying his best to stay composed even while carrying so much pain. By the second night, she tried convincing herself she was being dramatic. He's a repairman, she whispered to herself. You just met him. You're not supposed to feel this attached. But she did. Something about meeting him had stirred a part of her heart that had been asleep for a long time. On Saturday morning, the knock came. It was the same knock as before Steady.com. Familiar in a way that made her chest tighten instantly. Emily froze, her heart leaping before she could even reach the door. When she opened it, she saw him standing there, Michael. He looked tired, his eyes slightly red. His posture weighed down, but he was smiling. A gentle, grateful smile that made her exhale in relief without realizing she'd been holding her breath for 2 whole days. Hey, he said quietly. I'm sorry I disappeared like that. She shook her head quickly. You don't have to apologize. My dad's stable now, he continued, and she could hear the mixture of relief and worry in his voice. They ran some tests. He's not out of danger yet, but he's doing better. I finally got a few hours of sleep. Emily felt warmth spread through her chest, soft and real. I'm glad he's okay, she said. Really? He stepped inside, carrying his toolbox again, and the apartment suddenly felt alive. Like someone had turned the lights back on in her heart. He didn't rush into fixing the sink right away. Instead, he paused and looked at her for a moment, almost like he was checking if she was truly okay too. I didn't want to leave the job unfinished, he said softly, but I also wanted to say thank you. Talking to you that day helped more than you know. Emily felt her face warm slightly. I didn't do anything. You listened, he said. People don't do that much anymore. She didn't know what to say to that, so she just gave him a small, gentle smile and motioned toward the kitchen. Let's finish what you started. He knelt beneath the sink again, pulling out the tools he needed, and Emily sat nearby, pretending to organize things on the counter while secretly watching him out of the corner of her eye. This time, the atmosphere felt different, more open, more trusting. Almost like they weren't strangers anymore. As he worked, they talked easily. He told her about growing up in a small town in Oregon, about his father teaching him to fix things, about the stress of balancing work and family. Emily shared a little about her job at the library, how she loved old books, how she had been feeling a little lost lately. Their voices blended naturally, like 2 people sitting around a shared campfire instead of a messy kitchen. At one point, she laughed at something he said, a small joke about his clumsy coworker dropping tools everywhere, and when she laughed, he looked up with a brightness in his eyes she hadn't seen before. It wasn't flirtation. It was gratitude, comfort, a hint of something deeper. She hadn't seen that look in a long time. Not from anyone. He tightened the last bolt with a careful twist, and suddenly the dripping stopped completely. Silence filled the kitchen. Real silence. Not the uncomfortable kind, but the peaceful, satisfied kind that follows a long, Unfinished task finally completed. Michael stood up slowly, brushing dust off his hands. There, he said. Good as new. Emily looked at the sink, then back at him. For some reason, her heart felt too full. Thank you, she said softly. For coming back? His eyes held hers for a moment, steady, warm, and filled with an unspoken connection neither of them dared to name yet. I wanted to, he said. The words were simple, but the meaning behind them was not. For a brief moment, the air between them felt charged with something new, something fragile but real, something that made Emily suddenly hyper-aware of how close they were standing. But before either of them could say anything more, a quiet stillness filled the space of feeling that something was beginning, even if neither could see the full path yet. And the truth was simple. The sink had been fixed. But what they felt for each other, that was only just starting to take shape. After Michael fixed the sink, the kitchen went strangely quiet, too quiet for two people who weren't just strangers anymore. Emily stood there holding the edge of the counter, trying to steady the sudden rush of emotions inside her. She knew something had shifted between them. Even if neither said it out loud, Michael packed up his tools slowly, as if he wasn't really ready to leave. He kept glancing at her, quiet and thoughtful, like he was trying to understand something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in a long time. Emily felt the same confusion. She didn't want to make things awkward, but she also didn't want the moment to slip away without acknowledging how real it felt. When he finally closed the toolbox, he let out a slow breath. Thanks again. For being kind, he said gently. Not everyone is. Emily looked at him, her heart soft. Anyone would have done the same. He shook his head. No, not like you did. The sincerity in his voice made her chest tighten. It wasn't just gratitude. It was something deeper, something he hadn't had the courage to say directly. The apartment suddenly felt too small for the storm of feelings inside her. And she walked toward the window just to get a little air. Rain was falling again outside. Soft, steady, peaceful. She watched it for a moment, letting the sound calm her racing thoughts. Behind her, Michael stayed in the same place, too quiet. Almost as if he was debating something. After a few seconds, she heard him speak. Emily, can I ask you something? And if it's too much, you can just tell me. She turned slowly. Okay. He rubbed the back of his neck the way people do when they're trying to be brave. Have you ever felt a connection to someone so fast it scares you a little? The world seemed to pause. Her heartbeat echoed in her ears, and for a moment she couldn't speak. She forced a soft breath and answered honestly. Double quotes, yes. She whispered. Michael's eyes softened immediately, like he hadn't expected her to admit it so openly. He stepped closer, just one step, but it was enough to change everything. They weren't strangers with polite distance anymore. They were two people pulled into the same quiet current. I felt that with you, he said gently. Emily's breath caught. I did too. There were no dramatic declarations, no bold gestures, just too tired. Honest people finally admitting something neither of them had planned to feel. Michael took another step forward. I know it doesn't make sense. We've only talked a few hours. And I have a lot going on with my dad and work, and you barely know me. I'm not saying anything should happen right now. But, he paused, choosing his words carefully. I haven't felt something this real in a long time. Emily felt tears tug at her eyes. Not sad tears, but the kind that come from being seen, really seen. After feeling invisible for too long? I haven't either, she said softly. He let out a slow, almost relieved breath. I didn't want to leave without telling you. I was scared I'd walk out and never get the chance again. You came back, she said. I had to, he replied. A soft silence settled between them, filled with emotion but safe, warm and respectful. Michael didn't reach for her. Didn't touch her. He just stood close enough that she could feel the quiet warmth of his presence. Emily stepped closer too, her voice barely above a whisper. What happens now? He smiled, a tired but genuine smile. I don't know. But I know I want to see you again. When things calm down, when I can give the moment the attention it deserves. She nodded. I'd like that. He exhaled again as if a weight had lifted off his chest. Can I tell you something else? Of course. That day, I rushed out. I kept thinking about something. He looked at her with a softness that reached deep. I kept thinking that of all the places I could have been when the call came in, I'm glad I was here. With you. Her heart almost broke at the tenderness in his voice. I'm glad you were too, she replied, for a long moment. They just stood there, two people who met because of a broken sink, now sharing a connection neither could have predicted. The room felt warm, quiet, suspended in time. Then Michael looked toward the door reluctantly. I should go check on my dad, but I don't want this to be the end of the story. Emily nodded again. It won't be. He hesitated for a second, then reached into his pocket and scribbled his number on a small notepad he carried. He handed it to her gently, her hands brushing in a way that felt like a spark, soft but undeniable. Call me any time, he said. I will, she replied. He picked up his toolbox, but he didn't move right away. Instead, he looked at her one last time with gratitude, affection, the quiet promise. Then he finally turned to leave. When he stepped outside, the rain hit him gently, but he didn't seem to mind. Emily watched him through the window as he walked to his truck. He paused, looked back, and their eyes met for one more brief moment, one that felt like the beginning of something they both wanted but weren't rushing. She lifted her hand slightly against the glass, a quiet goodbye. He gave a small nod before getting into his truck and driving away. The apartment was silent again. But the silence didn't feel empty this time. It felt warm, full, hopeful. Emily touched the small piece of paper with his number on it and held it carefully, almost reverently. She sat on the couch listening to the rain, replaying every moment of the day in her mind. She felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, possibility. A quiet kind of hope that didn't rush or force itself but simply existed, steady and honest. Maybe nothing was certain. Maybe life was messy and unpredictable. But one thing was clear. A man walked into her home to fix a sink. And somehow, without meaning to, fixed something inside her too. And for the first time in many months, Emily allowed herself to believe that something beautiful could be beginning slow, gentle, and real.